welcome on to Searching for Mana Soups.
Yeah, excited to be here, Lloyd, and thank you for having me.
Pleasure to have you on the show. For our introduction, Soups Ranjan, who is the co-founder and chief executive officer with Sardine. I will hand over to you, Soups, to give, just in brief, little bit about what Sardine is all about, and just some context around some scale, if you could be so kind.
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah. So we are about a 3-year-old startup, Series B. Our thesis is that we are all about safer, faster payments, or in other words, wherever there is a high risk payment, Sardine is over there to reduce that risk, right? And the risks that we reduce are essentially payment fraud, identity fraud, or compliance risks, right?
Yep.
So we offer two products. The first one is our risk platform, which is fraud and compliance in one single API, one platform, one dashboard for financial institutions, including fintechs and crypto companies. The second product is we also do account funding, and as first instantiation of that account funding, we have a crypto on-ramp. So you could essentially fund your crypto wallet using ACH bank transfers or using cards. For that second product, we are live on MetaMask, Brave browser, and about 20 different wallets. The biggest differentiator for us on the payment side is that in any of these high-risk industries, whenever you're loading money into a wallet or whenever you're purchasing crypto, typically conversion rates are really, really low. And they are low because essentially of fraud reasons. And Sardine takes care of fraud, and we think that fraud and payments are really, or fraud and friction are two sides of the same coin. And we've been able to achieve much higher conversion rates compared to the industry.
Thank you so much for giving that intro. So look, clearly a mission with some real purpose, already impact. And, having looked at the traction that you guys have got in quite a short period of time, it's so impressive. So congratulations. I know there'll be lots to do, so we'll go in that later on in the show. But just some of the kind of outstanding highlights, significant raise in your Series B, the leads being Andreessen Horowitz, which is obviously all-star. So a lot of venture capital efforts that you will have had to go through. So also we'll talk about that, but clearly going incredibly well in a tricky market condition. And then looking through the list of clients that you've partnered with and onboarded, again, it's just massive kind of wish list names. So such a kind of head of steam to this point, but I won't go into that later on in the show. So Soups, also a bit about your background. It was just to rattle through it now, kind of computer science, and then obviously a career in tech, but headline roles with Coinbase and also Revolut as well. So actually what I'd like you to kind of do it before we go into your background is talk about the genesis story for Sardine. Why the name, and then why at this particular point did you think that Sardine was needed in the market?
Yeah, absolutely. So the name is really funny. So the SAR in Sardine essentially stands for Suspicious Activity Report. Okay. So that is what you file with the financial regulator whenever you have a fraud case or a money laundering case, right? And also it's fishy, right? So we can make lots of memes out of it. So it's easy to say. It's easy to say in a loud bar, in a conference room, or in a bar, without having to spell it.
Amazing. And like I said, we'll go into your background, but just so we get it up front, so you explained what you do, but why did you want to do it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I always wanted to start a company. So Sardine is my first company. And while I was running, you know, payment risk or fraud for Coinbase, uh, my background is in cybersecurity or using AI to fight cybersecurity, or to, you know, I've used AI to fight things like click fraud and ad tech. However, I had never, done payment fraud. So it took me a while to essentially first learn payments, and then after that, learn about all the various fraud tactics that fraudsters are using. And Coinbase slash crypto happens to be, the best place to actually get a learning in this, because crypto industry attracts some of the most sophisticated fraudsters, from nation states to two guys in a garage, tinkering. So it was really, really good training grounds. And the more important thing was that the amount of time it took me to come up to speed, learning the ropes about payments and fraud and fintech, etc., made me realize that as new financial institutions or fintechs get started, these entrepreneurs, they will quickly have to come up to speed on all things fraud and compliance, right? And therefore, the need to start a company which is really like a picks and shovels business, and the embedded finance movement or the crypto growth, right, was very, very clear. And that's why we started a company around this.
Yeah, thank you. So what so it came to the point in your career where you'd found the thing that you felt well disposed to be successful to create, but there had always been an underlying desire to have a company of your own. Like, how far back does that date?
The desire to found a company?
Yeah.
Oh, that I would say, ever since I was a kid, I wanted to start a company, right, to be an entrepreneur, right? Yeah, and it just so happened that it took me a while to get started, because I'm an immigrant from India. It came to the US in the year 2000. It takes a while by the time you actually get a green card, etc., because you can't really start a company until you have a permanent residency here, unless you find another co-founder who has permanent residency. So yeah, so that's the reason why it took a while. But the other thing was that I was also at the stage in my career where I had worked at two very high growth startups, Coinbase and Revolut, where they had seen just tremendous growth, right? And I was fortunate to be in the front row seat, seeing how these companies were being built, new products were being launched. So that gave me a lot of good learning and confidence to go and do this.
When you're in that position, let's say Coinbase, and it's apparent that this thing is potentially seminal in its importance within this new era of technology, do you for moments forget that entrepreneurial drive and think, well, look, if I gel forevermore with this team, then this could be it, and I'm happy with that? That desire to set something up was because I wanted an impact, but actually here I'm getting to do it. And it's a double-edged question. Or is there always this burning desire that you do want to, for whatever reason, go create your own thing?
So actually there's a very interesting story around Coinbase. So Fred and Brian, the co-founders of Coinbase, they actually always hired a lot of former founders to come and join them, right? So, I joined Coinbase when we were less than 15 engineers, and total number of people in the company was probably less than 60, right? And many of the folks who had joined, even before me, and many folks who continued to join after me, they were all ex-founders, right? And they were all coming in and tucking in and doing what was needed. So that, and in our own domain, we all had the freedom to be entrepreneurial, right? So when I started at Coinbase, I was the first machine learning guy, the first data guy, and then I was given the mandate to run the fraud team. So we had a fraud ops team of 5 or 6 brilliant people. So myself, plus these 5 or 6 folks, and then over time, I hired a few folks. So really, the team started from like literally scratch, and then by the time I left Coinbase, we had a team of about 50 people, with a mandate to essentially bringing our fraud rates to near zero. That being the first mandate, while not affecting conversion rates, and then the second mandate being taking care of all things data. So I had the dual role of both data and risk. Right.
Why do you go on to leave?
Yeah, so I went on to leave Coinbase because I stayed there for close to 4 years. So I was vested, but then the second reason was while I was at Coinbase, I learned a ton about crypto. I learned a ton about payments, but not as much as I wanted to learn about payments. I learned more about crypto, I would say, because most of the folks who were coming to Coinbase to work there, they had this zeal or this idealistic vision of building a new world of finance, right? Finance 2.0. But I had the feeling that, I didn't really know Finance 1.0, right? And in particular, I didn't really know international payment methods, right? And I actually reached out to Revolut, because they were growing very rapidly. And, I at the time when I left Coinbase, I actually had the opportunity to work or to lead teams at, both Revolut, Chime, and Nubank, right? And because I saw the embedded finance or the neobank movement really take off, and I decided to go join Revolut so that I could learn all the variety of international payment methods in Europe and UK.
Yeah, I mean, either which way, two complete rocket ships to go join.
Yeah.
Well, how interesting. But underneath it, I'm starting to try and kind of unravel the drivers as these decisions have been made. And they all sound very logical and shrewd. But underneath it, is it still an acquiring information and knowledge on this knowing quest that you will set something up at some point? So at that point at Coinbase, you feel like you're still in exploring mode. You haven't found what it needs to be. I need to carry on. Actually, I'm just curious at this. I have patience. And I really like that when I see that in a guest, because I think so much of the media encourages, go to Y Combinator out of university, jump into entrepreneurship. And of course, that can work out. In extreme minority cases. But more often than not, you need to have gone and built up and accrued some type of secret that not many other people know about, so that you can then go and capitalize on it with the skill set to be able to go and do that. So I think actually the most successful, CEOs statistically, and never trust statistics, somewhere around 46, really contrary to what you see being sold by the media, certainly over the last 10 years out of Silicon Valley. But the interesting thing is so many of those founders that I've had on the show knew that they wanted to go build at some point. And they either ended up in like a significant role where they weren't the founder, but that was fine because the mission was big and the opportunity was huge, or they end up as the founder. So really interesting to see how that unwinds. We'll leave there the Revolut into Sardine moment, because I'm going to come back to that. What I'd like to do now is go back really far, as far back as you dare to tell us, to set the scene, Soups, of you growing up and the environment and the influences that you had. So if you want to explain that to us, that'd be great. Thanks.
Oh wow. So I grew up in India. I grew up in actually a small town in India, in the eastern half of India. It's a coal mining town called Dhanbad. And my dad was a physics professor at a university over there, right? And I had an amazing upbringing. Was fortunate to start learning coding and programming, from the sixth grade onwards, had found a passion for programming. And then I went the route that a lot of, young folks in India do, which is, I got into Indian Institute of Technology, IIT. So, and then
sorry, just to stick with this, because I'm really interested in it.
Yeah.
You had a father who was a professor in physics. Like, could you explain maybe some of the experiences that you got from that? Like, were you would he kind of spend a lot of time teaching you? Were you kind of therefore exposed to a level of physics and work and maths and so on and so forth that perhaps was beyond your peer group? Like, what was that like?
Oh, yeah, that was very true. Yeah. No, we, I grew up with like, my dad, teaching or tutoring at home as well. So
Yeah,
I remember, like days I would actually just like put my ear to the door and like sit there and listen to everything he was teaching, right? Yeah. So we grew up with lots of university level like physics and math books around us. I would see him do uh, like even tutoring on like experimental physics, right? And he whenever and wherever he would travel, he would come back with lots of books for me, right? So I was always a studious type, right? So I just soaked in any and all books that I would find lying around, right? Even if I wouldn't understand it. Yeah.
So clearly, there's this amazing exposure to an intellectual field. Were there any particular mindsets or ways of thinking that, whether it was from your father or others at that point, that you feel you might have benefited or had installed into you as well?
Yeah, the mindset was that of always being intellectually curious, right? In fact, actually, when I was growing up, I actually initially wanted to be a scientist or a researcher, right? So because my father, he has a PhD in physics. He also worked as a postdoctoral fellow at universities in the US and Canada before settling back in India. So I always wanted to go and invent something, right? So therefore, there was that creative drive was there, intellectual curiosity was there, uh, and in fact, after IIT, I went and I obtained a PhD in the US first, right? So I went to Houston, Rice University, where I got a PhD in EE with with a thesis all around distributed systems and network security, right? And in fact, after PhD, then I went on to join a startup which actually, curiously enough, had a small R&D division because they were tinkering and coming up with new product ideas, and we did launch new product ideas that we researched first and then launched end to end. And this is the days when AT&T Research and Bell Labs, these were like really, really famous, and they were booming, and lots of great new ideas were coming out of these institutions, right? So therefore, equivalently at this startup, which eventually got acquired by Boeing, I got exposed to doing really, really cutting edge research around detecting anomalous traffic or cyber threats being carried by large computer network institutions or by large telcos, right? So in fact, the funny story is that initially, like up until 2005, I actually up until 2005 till 2010, I would have probably thought that I would go into academia because I was very drawn to research. But then I realized that the face of computer research or computer science research was changing. It was more interesting to be in industry and still do that cutting edge research. And therefore the creative instincts that I had, which were leading me towards a path of academia, then switched into like, okay, let me go found something from scratch.
How do you see that potentially coming back into the fray for you, without talking about specifics? You have this platform which is incredibly innovative, which clearly has artificial intelligence, machine learning. I'm sure you either have already or are thinking about R&D. So that circle comes back, and you get to potentially fund that type of research. Are you thinking about that? Have you done that?
Yeah, so my realization was that in such an applied field as computer science, the horizon of research that you're looking at is really not very far, right? It's like a few years, right? Unlike fundamental science research, where you're looking at doing something which gets commercialized like 15, 20 years into the future. So in our case, right? So we do have a bend towards solving problems which are hard using cutting edge AI. So that's the sort of the fundamental thesis at Sardine. However, we are never gonna commit to doing like several years of research into launching a new product. It's all about making incremental progress with an eye towards the future, because we don't have in the startup we don't have the luxury of working on something for several years before you commercialize it, right?
Yes, I understand. That makes some sense. At Mana, we have a lab where we have sponsored some PhDs focused on the future of work, particularly in blockchain, around communication and distributed teams. The title carries on. I'll stop there. And if you're not necessarily doing it for IP, you do get good determinations back around 3 years into it. But no, I understand. You're going at a rapid pace. But for me, it's a shame. And that was really what I wanted to ask you as well. Is I know so many kind of brilliant people on both sides, but the way that it pollinates together isn't so good. As private companies acquiring more intellectual capacity and changing the world more and more and more, it's not good enough for IBM to be sponsoring the research anymore. So I do wonder how we solve for that, because the community of PhD or highly specific technical graduates coming through are really, really interested in technology in the startup world and science and engineering. So it just feels like something that could be a platform in the middle there could be a big player. I don't know if you have any ideas around that, or if that was a frustration of yours.
Yeah, no, I think especially in topics like blockchain, right, or cryptography, these are hard problems, right? In fact, if you look at it, right, Bitcoin was not invented in an academic lab, right? Right, it was invented by a pseudonymous person, Satoshi Nakamoto, or a group of people called Satoshi Nakamoto, right? So that I would say is it's somewhat a failure of the academic system, that some of the best ideas are coming from outside of academic research, right? But now, of course, academia has taken an interest in blockchain technologies, etc. Right? So you've had like famous faculty such as Emin Gunserer from Cornell, I believe, right? So he's launched his own blockchain, and there's many examples like that, right? Professor Don Song from UC Berkeley did something. So I think what we are seeing is, kind of a shift. Like earlier days, like faculty, they really in the US at least relied on funding from National Science Foundation or DARPA, right, in order to do some of this research. But now they're realizing that that they need to keep an eye towards what is possible in the private realm as well, right? So that's why you've seen that the days of those big computer science labs are over. Like no one ever built another lab like HP Labs or AT&T Research or Bell Labs, right? It's because everyone realized in CS that it's all very applied.
Yeah, that's really interesting to think of it like that.
Yeah.
So coming back to where you kind of like forming the career, and then we've gone through the part of the Coinbase story. Before we move on to Revolut, what's going on with you at this point in outside of work, so we can start to understand the really other important elements as well to Soups. So you've come over from India, you're studying in America, and then you stay in America from that point on.
Yep. Yep. So I came here in 2000.
Yeah. Okay. And so you're in the Valley.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, I'm in Berkeley, California.
And add some color to what's going on in that those kind of like, I mean, now obviously this is covering 2 decades, but when you get to Coinbase, what's your situation outside of work?
I'm married. I'm been married for about 15 years, and to someone who is essentially my wife did a postdoc at UC Berkeley, so she's the smart one in the family, a postdoc in biochemistry, and now she teaches at the UC Berkeley Extension Center. She teaches biochem and molecular biology to folks wanting to become doctors, to future doctors. We have 2 kids, 7 and 11, 2 boys, and so my life outside of Sardine is really just spending time with the family. I work only during the weekdays. I work really, really hard, right? Like from morning 7 a.m. till like night 1 a.m. every day. But then in the weekends, I don't work. I just try to spend some time with the family, go for bike rides, just hang out with my kids, spend time with them.
Well, congratulations for being able to maintain that with a startup. But if you're super productive in the week, it is possible. So let's dig into some of that. So just going to go through a few questions. We have a mana round, ultimately trying to find out what your mana is. Just a few other questions to start with. So let's start with any particular habit that you have, and in the week, in the morning, so that we can get the scene.
Any particular habits I have during the week? As in, what is my week
in the morning? Like? Yeah, in the morning. What you got some rituals?
My ritual is really just waking up and rushing as quickly as I can to my espresso machine and making myself an espresso, right? I cannot function without espresso.
You're mentally in the right zone then. You don't need to go and have a nice shower to, not go flip out at the whole work.
Oh, yeah. No, I do need a shower. I need a good shower every day in the morning. And that's, some of my best thinking is in my shower,
Okay. That's almost like meditation.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Do you have any particular mantra or an affirmation that you come back to regularly?
Interesting. I think I thrive in a creative environment, right? So my mantra for life is really always questioning why something can't be done better. Always thinking about how can you improve something that you're working on, right? So I'm always driven by sort of pushing the boundaries on anything. Right?
Love it. Is there anything that keeps you up at night at the moment?
No, luckily things are good. I mean, the only other thing would be lately it's really just the state of the economy, right? So it's hard to see a lot of my friends and colleagues and lose their jobs, right? So we are going through sort of a rough patch in the tech industry overall. So yeah, that's the only thing that sort of the background worries me. However, I do see still that there's lots of amazing companies still being formed, even though some others are going out of business. So yeah, the net, I think we're moving in the right direction.
So nothing to do with what you're seeing trend-wise with fraud is keeping you up at night.
Oh yeah, that is always there. But sort of got used to it, right? Like in the early days of Coinbase, I would remember it used to really keep me up at night, literally, right? Like the fact that fraud rates, when they would spike up, it used to affect my mood, my blood pressure, my sleep, right? But now that but a lot of that was learning how to control fraud rates. So now I'm fortunate at Sardine to be blessed with an amazing team, and we know how to manage the fraud risk, right? A lot of the worry that people typically have is because they don't really know what to do in such certain situations. But now that myself, my team, we're all like former fraud fighters. My co-founders, one of them used to fight fraud at PayPal and Uber. I have assembled a team of fraud fighters from many other industries and companies, right? So we know how to deal with the problem.
Internally, as a founder, there's external. It could be in the personal life, it could be macro economy. Internally in the business, is there a thing that is a challenge concerning you need to solve right now?
Oh yeah. So we run Sardine like a compound startup, right? So we have essentially 3 business units inside Sardine, and the goal would be in future as well to keep adding new business units, right? So instead of executing linearly, like you get product market fit and then you scale that, and then you think about the next idea. What we did was like slightly different. So we said we will find product market fit in one area, right, and then while we're scaling it in parallel, we'll start another one, right? So that's why we have essentially 3 business units. The first one was risk platform that I described earlier in the show. Second one is our crypto on-ramp. And now both of them have product market fit. We are now acquiring customers. The third one is what we call risk insights. So we are bootstrapping that right now. Risk insights is essentially our attempt at building one of the largest fraud data consortiums out there, right? So of course, with our risk platform, we already have a consortium of sorts, right? Where all our customers are contributing data, and each of them they benefit from the data that others have contributed, right? However, with risk insights, we want to bring non-customers into the fold as well, so they can query our consortium, and then the consortium keeps growing larger. The fundamental problem that we're trying to solve with risk insights is one of the first ones is ACH fraud, and then the second one would be what we call authorized push payment fraud, which takes the form of Zelle scams in the Zelle network in the US, or the scams that you see in faster payments in the UK, right? Yeah. So now, first and foremost, with ACH fraud, in the US, you would find that, of course, the big banks, they share data with each other. So if you have like a stolen Chase account, you can't really walk into Bank of America or Wells and connect the stolen Chase account, because every night they're sharing a blacklist of stolen banks with each other. However, you could take the stolen Chase account and connect it to a Chime, right? And now take this Chime account and connect it to a Varo, take the Varo account, connect it to Digit, to Acorns, and so on, right? And none of these are fintechs that share that information with each other, right? And fraudsters know this, and they take advantage of it. So that they create this chain so that they can launder their stolen proceeds. It's hard to break that chain unless you get all these fintechs sharing information with each other. So that is what we are attempting to do with our risk insights.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. I've seen that in a different context as well, where that all needs to connect up. if you had a front cover of a publication dear to you, one you'd really want to be on the front of, might be Forbes, could be Bloomberg News. All of these things I'm sure you've been on or you're about to get on anyway, Soups, but this is the first big one and it's you on it. What would be the message that you'd put on the front cover?
Oh, interesting. Well, I never wake up thinking I want to be on the front cover, but the message I would like to be known for would be, or in fact, would want Sardine to be known for is that we are all about reducing the cost of payments by fighting fraud, right? Because if you really think about it, why do we pay, or why does a merchant pay an interchange fee when you swipe your card at the merchant, right? Why, when you go to buy a cup of coffee at a Starbucks, there's a fee of like 3.5%, right? That fee, when Visa or MasterCard they were started, that fee was actually meant to take into account the cost of fraud, right? Maybe someone stole your card and is buying that cup of coffee, right? But I would argue that that fee needs to come to much lower. So the cost of payments is really the cost of fraud. So we want to be known for or known as the company which brings the cost of fraud to near zero, such that we make payments cheaper and thereby accessible to everyone, including the unbanked and the underbanked. Right?
Soups, making payments cheaper with Sardine.
Yeah. Faster, cheaper, and more secure. Right.
Amazing. So just to explain for anyone in the audience or you for clarity, mana is a word that we took from gaming that means your magic. You have your power, your life, and then you have your mana, your magic. Think of it as a superpower. Are you able to, swim really fast? Can you fly? Can you, like a chameleon, disappear and hide yourself? Whatever it might be, Soups. What would you say your mana is?
I think my mana is being able to think outside the box, especially when it comes to any sort of like detective work that involves data, right? So which is why I started doing data science, machine learning before the term data science was coined, and started applying it to detecting cybersecurity threats initially days, then started using to detect click fraud in ad tech, and then now payments fraud, right? So my mana is that if you tell me that there's a pattern in a set of data, I'll sit down and find it.
So that clearly takes a bunch of technical capability. It also takes curiosity. You've got to enjoy solving that, right? So you're bringing both of those. The out of the box element, what's that? What do you think your mana in that element? Outside of the sardine tin, how are you thinking about that to achieve that?
Yeah. So that's about I never give up. I keep pounding my head against a problem. So like a few examples of that would be, at Coinbase, for example, we got hit by some of the most sophisticated fraud, right? One, for example, was SIM swap attacks, right? So which is somebody calls up your telco and ports your phone number to a device that they control by social engineering the call center operator, right? And once they have access to your phone, then they can actually switch over, or change the password to your email and change the password to your bank, because most of these other accounts, they use SMS as a second factor. And they also use SMS for account recovery. So now that, so we saw lots of people starting to get their phones SIM swapped, and then their passwords to the Coinbase accounts were being changed, and then they were losing funds out of their accounts, right? We kept pounding our head against this problem as to this has nothing to do with the crypto exchange, right? This is basically a vulnerability at a telco.
Yep.
Like vulnerability in the processes at the telco, they should not be just changing or porting your phone number willy-nilly to another random Joe Schmo who called the call center, right? So that lends itself to your crypto being stolen, right? Anyway, so to make the long story short, right, like we kept pounding our head against this problem until I figured out a solution, right? So it was basically, it involved literally anyone I would meet at any conference or any phone call I would have with anyone who is in the data business, asking them, can you help me solve this problem? Here's the problem, right? Took me like 6 months until I identified ways of solving it. So where I'm coming down to is like, it's maybe that intellectual curiosity when it comes to like, when I was doing my PhD thesis as well, like when you do a PhD, you have to come up with a way of solving a problem that you've also defined. So therefore, at least what I learned from my PhD, which is applicable here in Sardine and my further career, has been that never give up until you come up with that sort of solution. Right?
Or along with that, is it that you've got a notion that somewhere on the planet there's the enemy who are, benefiting from this, fraud, and you want to make sure that it, you're on the side of winning, right? Because you're on the side of doing good. It's horrible for people to be, have this, what actually sounds like it's a shrewd but a basic thing they're doing, right? They're not using like the most sophisticated hacking techniques here, but that's what made it complicated, because it's with the telco. And so obviously you're bringing stubbornness to solve the problem. You're using snowball sampling. You're talking to everybody, but it's also like, you mentioned like any kind of detective situation. It's like that, right? It's very much like that. Yeah. And it's like this real life thing that's perpetuating. What's the example right now of anything that's the most like heightened detective situation that Sardine is dealing with right now? If you can talk about it, Soups.
No, absolutely. So I think that the most heightened one, there's several in fact, but one of them would be, there's a lot of crypto scams happening, which are lending themselves to payment fraud. So for example, like if you use Twitter, I'm sure you get tweeted at by some random folks who are saying, here's this airdrop, or here's this giveaway. And now with Twitter not being able to actually detect those scams, it actually leads to a payment fraud. And I'll explain in a second how. You get conned by such tweets, or it could be on other social media platforms as well, right? Like you then click that link thinking you're gonna get to participate in an airdrop. You click that link, you get taken into, if you already have, a non-custodial wallet like a MetaMask, etc. You then sign a transaction, right? Thinking that you're going to get a airdrop, except what you don't realize is that you're actually, signing a malicious payload, which now, has ability to like completely wipe out your wallet clean, right? And then the next thing that happens is that you don't even know that this has happened, that you've signed something malicious, which is going to hurt you in the future. Now, in a few days later, you actually, let's say, want to buy crypto, not a few days, like even months later, you want to buy crypto, you buy crypto, you think that the crypto is going to land in your wallet, except it doesn't. Because there's this malicious payload that you signed, which essentially then any crypto which lands in your wallet, it just takes it and, withdraws it out of the door right away. So I don't know if you saw recently, there was this news of Kevin Rose losing about $1 million worth of NFT and other crypto assets out of his wallet from a similar attack, right? So that is a big problem. So what the crypto industry doesn't realize is that our UX is actually pretty broken in crypto, to the extent that people don't even know what they're signing. when they are signing a transaction. And there's a big need for what I would call like almost like a very sign for Web3, right? Somebody who verifies that this is some contract that you can trust, or this is a URL you can trust. And because that doesn't exist today, that lends itself to card fraud later, right?
Yeah.
Because now, like I don't know that my wallet has been hijacked. I go and I buy crypto using my own card, and I don't get the crypto delivered. So now crypto on ramps such as Sardine, then we suffer because the victims, then they go and charge back. They're saying that, hey, I didn't get my crypto, but you didn't get your crypto because you were actually scammed earlier, right?
So we are just coming into February in 2023 for any future listeners for context. So yeah, the Kevin Rose scenario is slightly surprising because he is someone you suspect would be sophisticated, which again proves the point of what you're just talking about. It's also off the back of late in 2022 some pretty dramatic events, right? So I saw a tweet in the last week from CZ, the founder of Finance, saying it feels like the market is starting to come back, which I'd say it certainly has looked like over the last 10 days from a price perspective and maybe from a confidence perspective. But what he said was super interesting, and it made me want to ask you a question around this. But he suspects that what it might have done is pushed back what we could call Web 2, or incumbents, larger organizations, institutes, from their level of confidence to come into the space. And actually what he was saying is, well, that's an opportunity for everybody who's Web3 native. But you sit in an interesting position where it could be called 2.5, I don't want to misquote, but you're bridging very much, which I think is the most exciting thing, where nobody should really know if it's Web 2 or Web 3. It's just, this is the technical frontier. We're making payments. Let's make it more seamless. Let's make it cheaper, et cetera, et cetera. So this does affect your strategy. What's your view on the events that have happened at the end of 2022 and the implications around the confidence of incumbents to come into the space? What are you seeing? What do you think?
Crypto is here to stay. It's not going to go anywhere. But I think the events of 2022 have shown us that that the era of speculation is either going to be over or should get over. And in order for crypto to be truly a meaningful part of the new financial infrastructure, we have to start thinking about other ways of using it. So what I'm incredibly bullish on as the use case of crypto is essentially use of crypto for cross-border remittances, as well as for cross-border commerce, right? So one of the things, for example, when I was, I travel quite a bit. So when I was traveling to Brazil or Argentina, I saw firsthand what a high inflationary economy can do to the way people think or operate. So all the folks in Argentina or Brazil, like they all want to get paid in a stable currency. They all want to get paid in US dollars. In fact, they would all much rather just get paid in a US dollar stable coin like USDC, right? So that's where essentially stable coins, especially dollar denominated ones or stable currency like euro denominated ones, can have like a very meaningful impact in the whole world, right? Because in some sense you could argue that that it allows the US dollar to extend its or to continue to further its place in the world as the currency of the world, right? That ambition gets furthered by the presence or by the use of stable coins backed by US dollars, right? So that is I'm incredibly bullish on. In fact, we are at Sardine, we are building a product to allow folks who are employed by a US based employer anywhere in the world to get paid in a stable coin, a USDC, right? Second one is use of crypto for FX conversion, right? So for example, when so companies like Revolut, right? Like when I went there, they really showed like the hunger that that citizens in Europe have for converting from one currency to the other, right, at the cheapest FX rates, which is what led to the tremendous growth or popularity of Revolut, right? Now, like as this world gets more connected, as people start traveling worldwide from one place to the other, right, the way FX markets operate will have to change. And in fact, no one has been using crypto to do the FX conversion yet. However, just recently, I don't know if you saw this article, Uniswap and Circle, they launched this very amazing article which said that they like using a Uniswap pool, you could actually go from USD to Euro at a cheaper exchange rate than if you went into the traditional FX market. One of the reasons for that is that the Uniswap pool, it's 24/7, whereas the regular FX markets, they close and they only run during certain business hours, right? So that goes to show that there's a lot of possibility over here about rewiring our legacy financial infra, which runs on old school, Vostro Nostro, or runs on like things which were built like 30, 40 years ago, like Swift. All of that can be rewired using crypto.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so of the same mindset of what you talk to, but when that frontier comes in and when it's put into retail hand, this, of course, as ever, can be utilized by bad actors.
Oh, yeah.
So we see, a need for the likes of Sardine more than ever, because we're both 100% confident that, the blockchain crypto is here to stay, and that will end up being beneficial. But because it's foreign, there is more manipulation that can happen. And so, every now and again, that can affect the sentiment in the market. But you see the talent in it, you see the infrastructure being built, you see the investment coming in, you do see the appetite from the incumbents. It's going to be an incredibly exciting 7 years. Just one more thing I wanted to ask you around generally, particularly with your background of being, somebody who was working on machine learning, AI, before the phrase was coined, data science and data analytics and so on and so forth. How do you see artificial intelligence playing a part coupled in the blockchain space?
Actually, AI, especially, it's been super exciting the last couple of months, right? Like with Chat GPT being launched, built on top of this language model, GPT-3, right? So my fear is that, first and foremost, AI in the hands of scammers and fraudsters is gonna create a lot of havoc. Today, you and I, we could spot a fraudulent text or an email based on the spelling mistakes or the grammatical mistakes they're making, right? But now, once ChatGPT is being used by these fraudsters and scammers, they'll have near flawless English or the local language, right? That'll be one. The second thing that I worry about is that online identity is very, very difficult to really establish verifiably online, right? So that's why you have documentary KYC providers. We work with several of them as part of Sardine, where you take a picture of your driver license and then you take a selfie. Now imagine with deep fakes, right? When you're moving your face side to side, deep fake could easily do that, right? Even when someone asks you to say something, you can actually have deep fake models actually say those words as well. So then it becomes very, very difficult to establish you are truly who you say you are. However, and that's where now Sardine's pitch comes in, right? A lot of this visible identity, like where you're visibly trying to prove something, you can game. But what you cannot game is your intrinsic identity, as in how do you hold the phone when you type, or your typing speed, right, etc. So we essentially at Sardine, we build a lot of machine learning models which look at your intrinsic behavior. We're big believers in intrinsic behavior monitoring. And so where I was going with that refrain was that AI is going to up the stakes in the battle for establishing identity online. However, use of AI to look at how you hold the phone, whether you handshakes or how you type, etc. Use of those invisible intrinsic behavior patterns can still fight against the other AI tools that bad actors are relying on, right?
Oh my God, there's so much dialogue around, probably for the last 5 years, the pros and cons of AI, and is it going to suddenly eradicate the human race, and one side and the other side being, we'll kind of benefit from it, as long as we write the right type of rules, and it's separated, it's not all one. But GBT3 is what it is, but 4 goes onto the net. And like we've seen the state of robotics as well. You see deep fakes where you believe that it's the person now, as you guys obviously like really deeply into analyzing, and to hear the stakes now are having to understand how I hold a phone or how I type. Someone who used those early Revolut products where I'd take a selfie of myself and just write my name there to prove it. In that amount of time, it's become that much more sophisticated. It's unbelievable. You've got to like release a program so that we can all keep up to speed each like month with like where the war's at now. It's obviously completely fascinating work that you're doing. Okay, look, I've taken a lot of your very precious time, which I really appreciate. Just a couple final things. I want you to finish off talking about the company. So we haven't really got scale of the company itself. So how many people are you at the moment?
Oh yeah, so we are close to 90 people right now. We are remote first, a global company. Most employees in the US and Canada, but we do have a few employees in many other countries like Brazil, Egypt, Japan, India, etc.
Amazing. And this is amazing book that your investor wrote, which is about culture. Wrote 2 books. The hard thing about the hard thing, the hard things about the hard thing, something like that.
Yeah.
And you are how you act. And he really believes that, great leadership and so on, if it is really strong, can create a strong culture. And that's best when that's close to the culture of what the business is doing. Hence, keeping your desk really immaculately tidy might be good in a chip maker. In Airbnb, having an incredibly creative environment that represents the, apartments that you're renting out might make a really strong culture. And these are materialistic things. It can sometimes be mind models and so on and so forth. I'd love you to talk about that. The things that you have embedded into the culture of the company that you're proud of.
A couple of things that we have in our culture values. So one is, I like to say we operate at the speed of thought. So I'm very action oriented. Don't like to sit down and pontificate, right? So if we want to do something, we should quickly do it to prove it that it works or not. Otherwise, just move on, right? So that's one. The second one is very much of a customer obsessed culture. So we from a BD point of view, like a business development point of view, we have everyone literally in the company. They are working hard to acquire new customers. My head of compliance does BD by, of course, my head of legal does BD by, of course, head of sales, and I have a head of BD. They are doing BD. But then after a customer has been integrated, we have a very much a very obsessive culture about keeping the customers happy. So we have we set up Slack channels with pretty much most of our customers, right, at the time of launch, and many of them after they have launched. We have weekly calls with our customers. We build strong relationships with them because we are there to essentially support them, with acting almost like an extension of their own fraud and compliance teams, right?
Yeah, I love it. And in the BD phase,
Mm-hmm.
I assume you're involved in it.
Yeah, yeah.
And okay, so how kind of straight down the line is your organization at this? Because I mean, you've got good traction, but there's a market to win. You know, do you have intense outreach and marketing, or is it from serendipity and network that you know, or both? Like, how are you operating that flow?
We've honestly not invested as much uh, into like outbound efforts, right? We've grown primarily by word of mouth in the initial days, and via a lot of sort of use of our own combined networks of myself and my team, and then you relying on our investors to also provide intros, right? Actually, in the early days, we like whenever we would have like any inbound investor wanting to invest, we just ask them, "Can you introduce us to a couple of your portfolio companies?" Right? And it used to work both ways. They would get data on us, and we would potentially have a shot at landing them as a customer. So that was the early days. Then recently, our outbound efforts have primarily focused on just content.
Yeah.
So we have a head of content, Simon Taylor, who's based in the UK as well. He's a famous guy. He writes his own blog. Was formerly co-founder of 11FS, and so he puts out a lot of content, as well as I put out a lot of content. I tweet or put stuff on LinkedIn almost daily, right? And just building up that brand awareness of Sardine, and then that lends itself to a lot of inbound customers coming to us, right? But now in 2023, we are gonna, of course, double down on content. We're also gonna do like more events, attend more conferences, and we're also gonna, sort of put more efforts into like outbound marketing as well. Right?
Yeah. Okay. As someone who comes across Simon's presence on the event scene in the UK fintech and Web3 arena, I think I'd only be doing everybody else a service for you to tell us what you think is his worst trait. Really, some negative thoughts about Simon Taylor. Come on, Soup, give it to us. This is going to be the clip for the whole show. I cut everything else, and we just.
So Simon cannot function unless he has several bottles of Diet Coke.
Ah, God! What a terrible person.
Yeah. And he's still so fit. He doesn't have like a sugar overload or anything. Yeah.
I was reading recently. I've
Yeah.
got like VC Twitter just hits me. So I just think the whole world is venture capitalist humor. But someone's saying like, I've got a disproportional amount of friends who just drink Diet Coke, who are really successful. You what? My Diet Coke drinking, was it Diet Coke or Diet Pepsi? What's Simon drinking?
Diet Coke, I think.
It's Diet Coke. There we go.
Yeah.
Classic. Get a massive order in. Okay, fantastic. So just to conclude, if you could set out the scene, it can be as far as you like to go. It'd be 300 years, like Massa's vision for SoftBank, if you want. But it could also be several years. Whatever you'd like. What's the Hollywood, A-star version for Sardine?
Oh, yeah. I think we want Sardine to be like a 100-year-old company, so to say. We want Sardine to be the network of networks. That's the goal, right? Yeah. As you see new payment rails come up, crypto, I would argue, is one new form of payment rail. You have UPI in India, faster payments in the UK. You have Alipay, etc. in China. You have Zelle and FedNow and RTP in the US. You have Pix in Brazil. These are all new forms of payment rails coming up. Of course, you have the legacy like the SWIFT, Visa, MasterCard, all of those as well. But what you don't have is no one is actually sharing information across each other, right? And for example, if a fraudster took over my bank account, they're not gonna care how they take out money from my bank. They might use like a faster payment method. They might try to check out. They might just just walk into an ATM. But all these networks, if they don't share data with each other, they'll have these blind spots. And therefore, I would argue that in over the next several years, what we're going to see is the fraud landscape is going to shift from your traditional card fraud into scams.
Yeah.
More and more of folks being scammed and money being taken out of their bank accounts. And in that world, the way we think about fraud has to completely change. And as faster payment, as we like to say, with faster payments comes faster fraud, and somebody has to be there to stop it. So we, in the long run, want to be sort of this network of networks, helping reduce the cost of payments and keep payments still secure, even when we move to a world of faster payments.
Absolutely massive. I love it.
Yeah.
So the final thing is, because it's searching for mana, so it's as much about you, and we've got to understand your story and how you think, and why you have done all of this to now. And I implore you to not worry about sounding grandiose, because most founders at this point will tie it back to Sardine. But I want you to not do that. Let's assume that happens. That makes you an incredibly successful person who's had a very fulfilling entrepreneurship journey. Long may it last forevermore, right? But what could you see yourself doing with this? What type of platform might you try and set up also outside of this? Do you go back into that academic interest? Well, how are you, I'm sure you've got very little time to think about this because you're such a busy mission on your hands, right? But to indulge us, what might we see you do with this, platform outside of that?
Yeah, no. So there's a part of me which, as Sardine gets larger and becomes, we planted the seeds for Sardine to be a compound startup. A lot of times, a lot of companies do it when they are much older, right? So we have planted the seed that we'll always take more and more new bets, right, and create new and new business units inside the company. So one way of thinking about Sardine would be, we become a larger payments company which has multiple different business units. But now, even outside of Sardine, what I would love to do is, I'm an idea man. I have more ideas than I could execute on. So at some point of time, maybe we'll set up some sort of an incubation unit inside Sardine to bring many of these ideas to fruition as well, right? All with the combined theme of, making payments faster, instant, and secure.
Yeah, I love it. Oh, it's so exciting. I'm at the kind of phase where 10 years of operating, because there's so much to carry on building, I'm really excited to do. But at some point, to be able to put yourself in the situation to be able to choose people who can operate better than you in this era, or have got the energy to go do it whilst you invest time or expertise or network into them. I think it's such an exciting zone to be in. So look, Soups, thanks so much for your time. Congratulations for all the success today. Lots more to do, keeping us safe. I look forward to touching in on this topic regularly, and unfortunately see where AI takes this new battle. But thank you so much for coming on the Searching for Mana show.
Absolutely, it was a pleasure, and I had a lot of fun chatting with you, Lloyd. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the Searching for Mana podcast. We hope you've enjoyed it and hope to see you again next time. Please subscribe to our YouTube, Spotify, or iTunes to make sure you receive all the latest episodes as they are released.